Good morning, welcome. Today's lesson we are talking about gluten, and for your cooking practice today you're going to be making muffins using the muffin method. I'm going to demonstrate the muffin method using a different recipe, pancakes, but the process and the techniques are exactly the same. The biggest thing we're trying to avoid here is the creation of gluten, which is anytime we mix flour with a liquid. And the more you agitate or stir your flour and liquid mixture, the more gluten you're going to create. So today, using the muffin method, we're going to mix all of our dry ingredients and all of our wet ingredients separately. So starting with our dry ingredients, we're going to start with our flour. I have my recipe over here on display so that I make sure I'm following along. This is asking me for 250 or 1 cup of flour. And anytime we're measuring a dry ingredient, we want to overfill and level off, like so, to get an accurate measurement. A more accurate measurement is weight. If you find a recipe that's included weight in the ingredients, it's just good to know that they have probably a more precise and more accurate recipe than others that don't include weight. And then the next thing we're going to include is our sugar, 30 milliliters or 2 tablespoons. Same process, overfilling, leveling off. You'll notice I'm using the back side of the knife because that's the flat side of the knife to level off. Okay. The next thing we're including is our baking powder. Make sure your baking powder is sealed when it's not in use because baking powder reacts twice. The baking powder we have in Canada anyway, reacts twice, once with liquid and then again with heat. And because we live in a pretty humid environment, if you leave it open, some of the reaction will take place before you use it and it won't be as effective. So we're including 5 milliliters or 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Baking powder is what's called a leveling agent, meaning that it's the ingredient in our recipe that makes our product rise. Other types of leveling ingredients are baking soda, yeast, eggs, and air, which is when we whisk things. Next, we're including some salt. I don't trust recipes without salt because you need salt to enhance the flavor of other things. But anytime we make our own food versus purchasing food from a store or a restaurant, we can use significantly less salt than they would. So salt is 2 milliliters or half a teaspoon. Same process of overfilling and leveling off. There we go. And then last but not least, I like to include a little bit of cinnamon in my pancakes because my kids like it. Sorry, this one's tough. Overfilling, leveling off. So there we have our dry ingredients. We are going to mix those thoroughly. So when you're making your muffins, you want all of your dry ingredients into a bowl and you want to mix them as thoroughly as possible because this is the only time you're going to mix thoroughly. Once you've added the liquid to this, you're only going to mix just gently. So there we go. Used my whisk for that. Now I'm going to do my wet ingredients. So for this, we're putting in an egg, our milk, and a little bit of oil. So let's start with our milk so that we get an accurate measurement. Whenever you're measuring a liquid ingredient, you want to use a liquid measure. This is opposed to a dry measure. With your liquid measure, and to ensure accuracy, you want to make sure that the measuring is on a flat surface and that I'm looking at the amount at eye level. Otherwise, you will have an inaccurate measurement. So this recipe calls for 250 milliliters. I'm getting down eye level. 250, like so. And then next I'm going to add in my egg. With the egg and the milk, ideally they will be at room temperature because they combined more thoroughly when you have them at room temperature. If they're cold, they just don't mix as well and your product won't turn out as fluffy. This egg is actually a fresh egg, so it's very much body temperature. And when we're cracking an egg, we want to crack on a flat, hard surface to the point where there's a small spot or circle that we can put our thumbs into. Let's see. And there we go. And once we've handled an egg, we want to make sure that we've washed our hands to avoid any salmonella. Anytime we're washing our hands, 20 seconds, fronts, back, all around, using warm water and lots of friction. Now you can use a whisk to mix these wet ingredients, or you can use a fork. I'm going to use a fork just because of I don't want it to overfill in this container, but you want to make sure that your egg is thoroughly combined with your milk, like so. Great, and now I'm going to add in the oil. It's really important that when you're measuring wet and dry ingredients separately, I don't want to use the same measuring spoons for my dry and my wet to avoid contamination of each product. So I'm going to use a separate measuring spoon for my oil, and this I'm looking for 30 milliliters. I'm going to measure to the side in case I make a mistake. I don't want the mistake to end up in my ingredients. And here we go. So this is just vegetable oil or canola oil. So there's 15 or 1 tablespoon, and then 2 tablespoons. There we go. Again, because oil and milk or water don't mix very well, we want to mix that really well right before we add it into our dry ingredients. You see I'm spilling a little bit. It's okay. And then in order to combine them as little as possible, in your dry ingredients, you're going to make a well or a hole in the center. And that just helps us to stir as little as possible. So I've just used the bottom of my measuring cup to do that. At this point, you do not want to use your whisk. If you use your whisk, you're going to get all of the gluten that you're creating will get stuck into the whisk, and you'll end up losing some of your product. So we're going to put that one to the side. You can either use a wooden spoon, or I actually prefer a spatula, because I'm going to be mixing from the outside in. So once I've got that, I'm adding my liquid ingredients into the center, like so. And I'm going to use this to mix as little as possible, because remember, anytime we mix or agitate the batter, we are creating gluten. And in this recipe, we do not want to create too much gluten. So it's okay if it's lumpy, but we need to make sure we've combined all of the ingredients. There shouldn't be dry spots. Let's see how we're doing here. Okay, it's looking pretty good. We're almost there. Nice. Making sure there's just no dry spots, but lumps are okay. That's looking good. Now, once you have finished mixing them together as gently as possible, you actually want to let the batter sit for a few minutes. So this allows a few things to happen. It allows the gluten you have created to rest, meaning that it won't react as much when you cook it. Also, you want to give the starches in the flour time to absorb some more of the liquid. So it will actually create a thicker batter when you go to put it on the pan. So I'm just going to leave this batter, and we're going to let that sit for about 5 minutes.